Okay, want to maybe encourage anybody who's out in the lobby to maybe come in and get a seat so we can get started. We're on a little bit of a schedule, I guess, tonight. We good? Okay, so my name's Mike Morris. I'm with a volunteer group in Newburyport called Stormsurge, and we've been about raising awareness to climate change issues and also motivating our municipalities to adapt to sea level rise and some of the other challenges that we are going to face relative to climate change. So tonight's program, Climate Reality, Real Facts, and what you can do about it, is a bit more climate oriented than it is sea level rise and coastal adaptation as we have been in the past. And we've gotten together with the First Religious Society of Newbury, their Climate Action Project, and Rob Bonney, our featured speaker. So I want to get started and just kind of warm up the crowd here with a few slides, a little bit of background and about climate change. So what I hope you might learn tonight is that, well, since you're here, I think you have a little bit of a sense of urgency about climate change, and hopefully maybe you might have more of one. Also, I want you to leave with an understanding of what you can do about it personally and also maybe on a political level. And also how you can get involved locally with some of the groups that are working on these types of things. So just roughly the agenda, my introduction, I'm Mike Morris, then Representative Kelcourse is supposed to be here, but he may not arrive on time, so we might put him towards the end. Rob, our featured speaker, and then after Rob, we're gonna have a bit of a discussion. And then we've got a webcast coming in at about 8:15 that I hope you'll stick around for to watch. So let's talk a little bit about attitudes about climate change. So Yale has been monitoring climate opinion in the United States all the way down to counties and states. And you can see with their latest study from 2016, there's a fairly large majority think global warming is happening. Climate change is happening. So that's somewhat encouraging, really. And really a large proportion of people, especially in our state and even the country, support regulating CO2 as a pollutant. And this is even true relative to coal-fired power plants. A large majority like this is actually in favor of phasing them out. So it's kind of curious that during the State of the Union last night, we were promoting reintroducing coal. But where the rub starts to come in on climate attitudes is what do people think? Is global warming harming people in the United States, or will it harm people in the United States in the next 10 years? So this has shifted a bit since the 2014 survey. The blue was much further over to the left. So people are starting to see, with all the weather disasters that are happening, that there's a likelihood that people are going to be affected. But still, it's a 50-50 split. But this is where it gets interesting. Most people don't think it's really going to affect them. And that sort of leads to sort of inaction, right? Because it's not really an urgent problem if you don't think it's going to affect you. And it is happening slowly, right? And so slow motion disasters take a while to unfold. And we also see that it's really not on the radar for discussion for most people. So we are basically the frogs boiling in the pot, and we have to be careful not to be that. Because our climate's already changed. You know, our atmosphere has over 400 parts per million of CO2 in it routinely now. It hasn't gone down. This is an old slide, but 2017 was also hotter than 2016, and that's just been the trend. We have these monster storms that develop mostly out over the ocean right now, but eventually these do impact land. And if you look at Europe, some of the surf that's come in into the shores of Spain and France is very huge from these big storms, and they've experienced a lot of flooding. Tornadoes happen year-round here in the United States. Used to be mostly a spring phenomenon. Now they happen year-round. And who can forget about Snow Mckibben a few years back? This is a picture of my truck down on Plum Island. It's quite a bit of snow. And of course, you know, you got to think about our kids and our grandchildren. I mean, this is a future that's unfolding for them. And that's some kids standing in the Ipswich River, which completely ran dry, not last summer, but the year before. So these children are going to inherit higher global temperatures. We're going to have more heat-related illnesses, and also going to have more tropical diseases in the temperate zones. We're going to have changing landscapes. Places are going to start getting drier. Some other places are going to start getting wetter. And if you think about places like California, they've had long drought, wildfires, and then flooding and mudslides. They've had it all in a short amount of time. And then, of course, ecosystems are going to be impacted, and that, of course, affects our food supply and rising oceans. We know about being a coastal community, and this all amounts to a whole bunch of economic losses. I mean, if you look at your health insurance, your car insurance, your homeowner's insurance, I don't think anybody's bill has gone down, and that's because these natural disasters that are happening, costs are getting shifted by insurance companies into all the policies. Somehow, we've got to pay for these disasters because the policies and the reinsurance policies themselves aren't covering them. So there's huge economic losses just from that alone. So let's talk a second about a tipping point. So most scientists think that if we can limit global warming to 2 degrees post-industrial time, that we shouldn't have major catastrophes. And then if you look at the Paris Agreement, we're trying to aim for a limit of 1.5, but if you look at this graph that's spiraling out through time, we're almost at 1.5 degrees Celsius already. So there's not a lot of room to work with there. Another way to look at a tipping point is in this waterfall. So these kayakers there, they're far away from a tipping point. There's no problem. These people here are close to a tipping point, but they can still take action and maybe not go over the edge. This guy, on the other hand, he's at a tipping point. He's locked and loaded. There's no backing out of where he is. So I want to take that analogy and apply it to this graph. This is the typical hockey stick graph. Everything follows this, but this is basically temperature rise plotted with different emission scenarios. But the way to look at this really is the other way around. Look at it like a waterfall. And then you put humanity in a clown suit and a boat at about the time frame, and you can see that we're already locked and loaded. We're already at a tipping point where we're going to experience some climate change. The question is, what do we do now? The option we have is we can modify the waterfall, right? If we take the right steps, it won't be such a steep drop, but right now we're on the steep emissions curve, and it could be very difficult. Anyway, we're not in the Paris Agreement, so what does that mean? So the federal government's failure to lead has transferred the opportunity, basically, to the localities, business leaders, and of course all of us. Now, one of the things you should know is that when it comes to our carbon footprint, most of it is in the form of producing electricity and transportation. So if you look at yourself, you look at your community, you look at your state, if you can focus on those 2 areas alone, you can modify your 60% of your carbon footprint. And I'll just use my family's carbon footprint as an example. So this is us, and this is the US average. So home energy-wise, I was being pretty efficient. We got 3 registered drivers in our family, and my wife drives a lot for her job, so transportation was a big part of our carbon footprint. But still, we were slightly less than the US average overall. So what do? We replaced her car with an electric car and added a solar array to the rooftop, and we cut our carbon footprint almost in half. So that's what you can do on a personal level to affect this. And of course, on the national level and just policy-wise, I mean, there's actually opportunity in climate change. And we shouldn't be lagging behind China and Europe in terms of being involved in the renewable energy market. So now, what I actually wanted to do is move on to, well, I was going to introduce Jim Kelkhorst, who's not here.
Later.
So he'll be here later. So I'm actually going to switch over to our main speaker, Rob, and introduce him to talk a bit more about this. So Rob Bonney is a novelist, he's a climate activist, and he's a leader of the Citizens Climate Lobby in the North Shore chapter. And he's taking a leave of absence. I'm kind of envious of what he's doing, and I spoke to him about this. He had a career in nonprofit administration, and he's focusing solely on this climate crisis. So that's a great thing that he's doing. He's a resident of Boxford and a member of 350 Mass and also Mass Audubon and the Sierra Club. And he's working to pass a Massachusetts statewide carbon pricing policy. We've got to make fossil fuels sort of unattractive in order to motivate people in the other direction. I mean, everything's measured in dollars in a capitalist world, and that's really the scorecard. So if fossil fuels are cheap, that's where people are going to spend their money, right? He also met with Representative Kelcourse, who will be coming in later, and other members of our group, and also the Climate Action Project to discuss this climate legislation. So without further delay, I'm going to bring Rob up here.
Hello. So that's me. I'm in a lot of groups. I'm going to talk about all three of those tonight. And I'll overlap a little bit with what Mike said. You never know when you're given a talk the level of knowledge, although I'm pleased to find that these days people know a lot, especially in Massachusetts. So there may be a couple of slides that I go through quickly since I think Mike's already made the points. So that is me and 1,400 other people. So I should tell you that in order to show you the first 25 or so slides, I had to be trained and pass. Well, I didn't have to pass any tests. I just had to go. The training was by an organization called Climate Reality Project, which I see some nods. It was founded by a certain vice president, and it was featured in Inconvenient Sequel. At the end, they encouraged people to get involved. And so this was the 3-day training. Mr. Gore is right in the center front there. This group actually knows who he is. I spoke to students earlier, and they're like, who? Worked very hard. He was sweating. He was up and down on the stage, behind the scenes. He really has given his life to this cause. He gave us 500 slides, and I have spared you 475 of them. We'll get right into it here. So you may have noticed the title, Real Facts, as opposed to Facts. Obviously a joke. It depends on who you're talking to. I actually haven't gotten into a conversation yet where someone challenges me on whether climate change is real. But you may have heard some analogies. The one that I plan to use when I have the chance is, okay, I have a horrible illness. It's really hurting me. I go to the doctor. He says, you need this treatment. I get a second opinion. I get 98 more second opinions. And then I look, 99 of the doctors said, get this treatment. One doctor said, don't do anything. Who am I going to listen to? Okay, so there is one scientist out there that says climate change is not human caused, but I'm going to choose to listen to the 99 other ones. That's the real facts, according to me. We're never going to have 100% knowledge of what's coming down the pike. But if you wait until you have 100% knowledge before you act, you're never going to have that. So here's a picture that Mr. Gore starts, usually with the Earth, and then this picture here. You're going to have a very quick chemistry physics lesson, very quick. You may think, I don't need this. I'll give two excuses for doing it. One is that I found myself being asked, so how does that actually work? And kind of stumbling on it. You know, it's been a long time since I was in high school. And when you hear climate change stories in the news, right, they don't explain exactly how it happens. We all know CO2 is involved, right? So the other thing is I have a very close relative. I won't divulge who it is, but that person said, yeah, it's the ozone, right, that's causing climate change. And I said, no. Well, I didn't know what to say, so I just moved on. So here's a picture of the atmosphere. You know, when you're out and you look at the sky and think about the average person on Earth, they look up and they think, that's really huge, right? I mean, it goes to the moon, maybe to the stars. But in terms of what holds our greenhouse gases, it's very small. This is our atmosphere. It's about 5 to 10 miles, depending on where you are on Earth. So this is what we're dealing with. Actually, a smallish space. The This is part 2 of the physics lesson. Where the sun's radiation comes to the Earth. Some of it's absorbed, some of it bounces off, and then some of it comes back to the Earth again, because in that atmosphere are the greenhouse gases. I think probably everybody here knows that, right? And the other fact that it's good for me to remind people is greenhouse gases are good. We're not claiming they're bad. We wouldn't be here if we didn't have them. Earth would be too cold. So this is, up until 150 years ago, this was a pretty stable situation. I mean, there was times in the past where Earth went through some violent changes, but since humans been around, it's been remarkably stable. So, you know, when we started burning a lot more stuff all of a sudden, with the Industrial Revolution, the second red arrow down is the heat bouncing back again, or more heat coming back. So it's just a primer in case you find yourself wanting to explain, you know, why is CO2 involved? It's involved this way. And as you probably know, we have been really dumping a lot of stuff into that little atmosphere. We've kind of stopped increasing how much, but we are pretty level, but the thing is we need to really cut it down. I'll talk about the Paris Agreement later, but we can't keep doing this. I think you all know that, right? This kind of parallels a slide that Mike showed. It's an animation. I couldn't edit it to add in 2017 to it. The trend is very obvious. So now the 17 out of the 18 past year, the 17 hottest years ever have been in this century. So we know heat, global warming, and you know that's concerning, things getting too hot. There are a lot, when I talk to people, it seems like different impacts from this warming resonate with different people. So I'm going to go through quickly the different ways that this heat makes people feel that it's harmful to people and all life on Earth. And I'll go through these somewhat quickly. I suspect some of it's not new to you, but hopefully helpful, because one of the reasons that we're having these talks is that we want to arm you all to go out and be persuasive, because we need to be doing a lot of persuading. There's still a lot of work to be done. So this is pretty well known. This is sunny day flooding in Miami. This is not, there was no storm before this. There were no high winds. It was not a full moon. And this happens regularly down there. And with sea levels rising, this is just going to continue to happen. So that's one, flooding. I almost didn't put this picture in because it is, still makes me almost want to cry. You may recognize this from the news, from Harvey. This is a community in crisis. They could not deal with the worst flood in 500 years, and these people were stranded. Why are we talking about storms? Some of you that have been a climate activist for a while know that we've been a little hesitant to talk about weather events related to climate change, because you could get shot down saying it's not necessarily because of climate change. But Scientific American recently published conclusively that storms are worse. They are more powerful. They have more rain. They're more damaging, and they're exacerbated by higher seas. The number 5, the Scientific American said something like, we believe this to be true, but it's a newer level of research about the jet stream affecting these storms. And I'm going to show you an image that was one of the things at the Al Gore training was a scientist at the forefront of this research talked about the jet stream. And some of you may know this, but the Arctic, being really unusually warm, is messing up that jet stream. And this is really what's kept our weather as predictable as it is. And there is even some estimations that the anomaly in the jet stream kept Harvey locked in there for 5 days, with 5 feet of water. So we do have severe storms as another consequence. Again, how could you not know about the fires? It was constantly in the news. The connection to climate change, drier air, warmer air, and drought. I don't know how this is. I learned it a little while ago. The significance of climate change in desert environments like this is, as you may imagine, people are struggling to find shelter, food, and water, and they go to where those resources are, and there's conflict. And the Department of Defense, in some sources, call climate change the #1 threat, but certainly a major threat to our national security. So we've got national security impacts too. This is a horrible statistic. It does say by the end of the century, so stick around so that we can minimize this. I mean, we are going to lose some, we are losing already some animals, but we have a chance to not make this become a reality. And you can imagine what's going to happen with that many species and the web of life and the balance of nature. It's very dangerous. Al Gore made that slide. He likes some bells and whistles. I deleted a lot of the bells and whistles actually, but I left that one in. So I don't know how many of you talk to policymakers or family members who push back and say, you know, we can't afford to take on fossil fuels, and our whole economy relies on fossil fuels. It'd be disastrous to raise the price of gas, for example. Well, I think it's pretty clear that we're going to pay a hell of a lot more if we don't stop burning fossil fuels as much as possible. So you can take a sigh of relief that I'm not going to show you any more horrible slides. This is my hopeful segue slide. I love this picture, and it starts the part of my talk where I cover some of the really exciting things that are going on across the world. People are creatively dealing with this problem. This is in Sudan, and it's an example of what's called leapfrogging. And what that means is that you can see they don't have power lines, right? Well, hey, forget that. We're not even going to build power lines. We're just going to slap solar panels and not need to connect them all. And the possibilities are mind-boggling. This is just one example of doing things a new way. No power line. So wind power is a very exciting field that just keeps exploding. Denmark is actually sometimes selling its extra electricity from wind. And they plan to, some of you may have seen several movies where Denmark is profiled, and they plan to be about as net zero as possible, as soon as possible. They're really committed to it. Other countries, Portugal, 4 days in a row, all wind for all their electricity. Germany, many days. Now, I'll show this other slide. So we've got enough wind blowing around. Of course, we have to capture that wind, right? And I do know that there are some implementation steps, and there's some technology needs to catch up with batteries and the grid. But certainly, we could get a lot more of our power from renewables like wind. And by the time we install all that, we'll probably be ready to go all the way. So I think we're all ready. I know I'm ready. Okay, solar, this is a busy slide. You can see, read for yourself. I'll add my little story about Arizona. I was there last summer, and I'm driving around thinking, it is very hot, it's very sunny, there's nobody anywhere from hundreds of miles. Why isn't there solar panels everywhere here? Well, there's two reasons for that. And well, actually, I showed this slide first. and the cost of solar is just going down, 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 rather quickly now. The reason there isn't more solar in Arizona is because the utilities are pushing back big time and making it difficult. They're working with the state government to slow it down. You know, it's hard for them to make money that way. I mean, maybe they should figure it out, and if they could be part of the solution, great. But on the other hand, Arizona is second only to California in solar capacity. So there's a battle going on, but we're going to win. This, if you saw the Al Gore movie, was one of the highlights. In just 4 years, Chile went from a little bit of solar to a lot of solar. So that was in 4 years. Some of those are planned, but that's commitment. They've committed to that much solar. In fact, I've heard that they've gone beyond that since that slide was made. So why? Because the government and the people said, we're going to make this happen. And they made it happen. Okay, now we switch to solar. Okay, so we've got enough stuff coming from the sun, right? Now I understand capturing it is where we, you know, the challenge is. Just gonna move on to this slide. Another example of advancements. LEDs, in 15 years, it's gonna completely capture the market. And why is that? Again, not only government, Massachusetts bought in big time to this, but people bought into it too. There was a good awareness campaign that this is a money saver, and it's also reducing emissions because you need a lot less electricity for a light than you used to. So all of this stuff adds up. This is pretty cool. All these companies are making electric cars. I'll add to this that next year, Volvo plans to only sell hybrids and electric vehicles. And that's next year. And their business plan is to get rid of internal combustion engines altogether. Another fact on the autos is that Tesla is now valued higher than both GM and Ford. So there is interest, there is momentum. Of course, as I suspect you know, it depends where you get your electricity from. So you have an electric car, but you're charging it with electricity from natural gas, you still have a significant carbon footprint. So, but we're coming at it from all directions, as you can see. A lot of momentum, putting the pressure on. The people want this. We make the change happen. All right, and then part 3 is the solutions that I'm going to share with you and find out, you know, who's on board with them. So these are all groups represented here today doing great things. The group in the middle is my family, and they are doing individual things, including being more mindful of the thermostat, although the boy in the t-shirt making a snowman doesn't seem to care what temperature it is. So Paris, as Mike mentioned, 2 things about Paris. One is that, yes, the U.S. is in the process of pulling out, but as I think a lot of you know, as soon as the president made that announcement, many states and cities around the U.S. said, we're in. And if you think about it, the economies of some of these states, like California, is larger than almost every country in the Paris Agreement. Newburyport, congratulations to you. That's awesome that you are also part of the Paris Agreement. It does give hope to the world that the United States, is not, you know, it's not lost. We are still here. The other part about Paris is it may be hard to imagine that the world could accomplish anything together these days, right? The success story that I like to share is about the Ozone Hole. Back in 1980, I think it was, some scientists said, oh crap, we have a big hole in the ozone. They did a lot of research. Within 2 years, the world got together, formed the Montreal Protocol, banning refrigerants of a certain type. that were known to cause the ozone. And just a few weeks ago, NASA did an update saying that because of worldwide cooperation and public policy, government action, the ozone hole is half the size it was, and it's continuing to shrink. So that worked. It can happen. It does need the people, and maybe now more than ever, we have to rise up and say, you're going to do this. You're just going to do this, because we insist. Citizens Climate Lobby. So there's a lot. Did I say this already? I can't remember. A lot of groups with 3 initials and the word climate or environment in them. They all sound the same. I'll try to distinguish this. One, this is what I spend most of my time doing, is volunteering for Citizens Climate Lobby. And they are a group with a particular focus, passing a national carbon fee and dividend. I'm pleased to find that carbon pricing is no longer a concept people have not heard of. And so there's a lot of talk about it. We promote a specific type of carbon pricing. We'd be happy with any, but we think this one is the best of the options. What I do in Citizens Climate Lobby is national. So I work with elected officials. I have an asterisk there about the national part, which I'll explain later, but it started as national. The past 6 years I've been working on getting a carbon fee passed. And so we meet with legislators, we develop relationships with the elected officials, and Seth Moulton is our guy. Mr. Moulton is a proponent of carbon fee and a dividend. He will vote for it when it comes to the floor, and so he's been a great ally. I'm not responsible for working with Senators Markey and Warren, but there are members of my group that also continue to talk to them, write to them, put pressure on them. That's Citizens Climate Lobby. Connected to Citizens Climate Lobby because a lot of our volunteers encouraged their members of Congress to join the Climate Solutions Caucus. It's also known as the Noah's Ark Caucus because you can't join unless you bring a member of the opposite party with you. So it is split evenly, 34 and 34. 34 Democrats, 34 Republicans. And it is intended to be nonpartisan and have respectful conversation. And ultimately, we're hoping for a voting bloc that will help us pass carbon price. Here, if I can figure out the technology. So I mentioned earlier carbon pricing, and then carbon fee and dividend is a specific type of carbon pricing. I've explained carbon pricing hundreds of times. It's hard to do in an elevator speech or a talk in front of people. I don't know how much you know about carbon pricing, but I have found that after talks, people are like, yeah, I didn't really understand that. So I keep revising my talk. Feel free to let me know afterwards if it needs work. So I have 2 ways that I'm going to try to increase knowledge and understanding of carbon pricing. One is a very nice video that was done by Citizens Climate Lobby. I'm going to play it for you now. It's 2 minutes. If you feel like it's going by kind of fast and you're not quite sure you understood, don't worry about it. Let it soak in. I have 2 more slides. We're going to try to reinforce that message. So I will play the video for you now. Hopefully. Okay, here we go.
The climate is changing. Extreme weather is disrupting livelihoods and food supplies around the world. This is observed. This is documented. This is the scientific community's consensus. The climate is changing. Carbon emissions are driving that change. Emissions come from burning fossil fuels. So if we want to slow or even reverse the change, we must lower our fossil fuel use. By charging a fee on fossil fuels and returning that revenue to households as a dividend, we can do just that, starting a chain of positive effects. Fossil fuels become less desirable. Cleaner sources of energy become more competitive. The dividend creates millions of jobs. Carbon emissions go down, reduced air pollution saves tens of thousands of lives, and climate change is brought under control. We can make this happen, but enacting a carbon fee and dividend isn't in our hands, it's in theirs. How do we sway them? What can we do? We can use our voices to express political will and demand action. We must help our elected leaders work together. It's on us to tell them what we want as a group. Because when voices call out together, their impact multiplies. Government can respond to the will of the people, provided we tell the government what we want. And what we want is a livable world. This is what Citizens Climate Lobby works for. To empower citizens to connect with and influence their members of Congress. To spread the idea that each one of us can address climate change. Bring your voice to citizensclimatelobby.org.
Anybody know who that is? We're the young people. I think he's a vampire or something. I actually have no idea who that is. But he's some kind of celebrity. That's not the right slideshow. All right, so that was the video about carbon fee and dividend. So, there we go, next slide. Okay, so carbon fee and dividend, that's what Citizens Climate Lobby does. Obviously, the point is to reduce emissions. In 20 years, by 50% is how the plan is. If it was implemented as we've designed it, in 20 years, we would reduce emissions by 20% in the US. There are a lot of side benefits. Obviously, putting less poison in the air is going to reduce healthcare costs by millions and millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of lives. This has all been studied. I put a red box around economic growth because when you talk to people about dealing with the climate problem, and as Mike showed before, attitudes are like, yeah, we need to deal with it. And especially when you focus on pollution. If you put it in those terms, people are more amenable to it. Nobody likes pollution, right? But then when you say, okay, but your gas bill, your gas at the pump might go up a little bit. The studies, a very exhaustive study by a reputable organization, nonpartisan, has found that turns out doing this kind of mechanism grows the economy and creates jobs. So wow, we thought maybe it would be a little bit painful, but it turns out to be beneficial. So it's win-win in that regard. The dividend aspect, maybe I'll save for Q&A at the end because that is another concept. There is carbon pricing, which could be a carbon tax, whereas the government keeps some or all of the money that's collected by putting a fee on fossil fuels. In the dividend policy, the money is returned to households. But why we choose that, probably don't have time to explain it for you now. So this is my second approach to explaining carbon pricing. It's a behavior modification policy. And for serious addictions that are widespread, government needs to get involved because it just doesn't happen otherwise. It's certainly very slowly. And, cigarette tax is a real tax. It's not a fee, but its mechanism is a behavior modification mechanism. And it's a very well-known human behavior that as prices go up, people think, how am I going to save money? And one of the main ways to save money, well, if you're talking about cigarettes, you buy less cigarettes. It's actually cut smoking way down, like from nearly, it's like 70% of reduction just from this policy. When it comes to carbon pricing, people are going to be incentivized to maybe I'll get a more efficient vehicle. Maybe I will think twice about driving everywhere all the time, no matter what, and not plan my trips. Maybe I'll insulate my home. It's actually 1,000 ways you can save money, and that's what the policy is intended to do, make you think twice about burning as much. In the States, things are going backwards federally, honestly, on the environment. So some states are saying, okay, well, if you're not going to do it, we're going to do it. Massachusetts has done it before with health care. We've done it with marriage equality. We've done other things. And lots is happening in Massachusetts. And one of the reasons why I'm here is that for it to actually happen, for these solutions to happen, we need people power. We need people to be pushing for it. And unfortunately, this is a very fantastic agenda by 350 Mass that I cannot explain to you because I'm running out of time. But kudos to 350 Mass for advancing many of these bills, several of which are looking good, but not at the finish line yet. So we need people to say, hey, don't build a pipeline. Don't build another pipeline. In a couple of years, we're not going to need it or want it, and we're going to be stuck with it. If you're going to invest in something, invest in offshore wind and a million other things. Certainly not new pipelines. Solar, I've mentioned the problems in Arizona. We have our own challenges with obstacles for people to get solar when they want it. And putting a price on carbon price and carbon fee. 350 Mass also thinks that's a very important priority, and we've actually gone into meetings with each other together. 350 Mass has brochures out in the lobby. Some people here are members and be happy to talk to you about how you could help get these things passed. And then, as I said, at the states, I had that little asterisk on carbon fee and dividend national policy that I've been working on for years. Well, turns out that Massachusetts has some really great bills in the state, at the state level for carbon pricing. And the Barrett bill, which is by Senator Barrett, is quite similar to the federal policy. It is revenue neutral. The Benson bill is wonderful. Actually, I'd be happy if either passed. That one retains some money to fund all sorts of things, from improvements to public transportation to grids to, I don't even know, all the possibilities in my area of expertise. So these are doing pretty well in the House of Representatives of the state, at the state level. We think we need about 10 or 11 more members to commit to voting for this to pass through the House, which is a gettable number, but we don't have it yet. And so what I do as a citizens climate lobby person, now that we have a state bill, instead of having Seth Moulton to meet and greet with, I have 23 people to meet and greet with because there's one all over the North Shore, people all over the North Shore. And so we go around and we say, hey, this is good for the economy and it solves the climate problem. And so again, we have a table out there. We have brochures. My cards are out there too. And if you don't get a chance to talk to me today, I'd love to talk to you about how we can be successful here. Here's a map to the right of all those colored arcs are all the members of the House that are in the North Shore chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby, that we are met with almost everyone there. We've actually convinced a couple people to commit to vote for the bill, and others moved along. And we'll continue. One thing about the timing on this is that these bills are part of the current legislative cycle, which goes through the end of July. And if we don't pass the carbon pricing bills this term, that means it could be 2 more years before we do, because things start all over again after the elections in the whole process would start again in 2019 and could go until 2020. So if you know anybody here, you have a couple of favors you can call in, or who knows what, let me know. We can go get a meeting with these folks. So cities too are stepping up to the cause, and Newburyport is one of them. The first I want to mention is New York City, big news. They are divesting all of their gigantic pension fund from fossil fuels. It's considered, I think, the biggest or one of the biggest pots of money in the world, so that really sends a message. There's Bill Mckibben. Those of you greenies in the room know who he is. He's said that this could be a game changer, a turning point. They're also suing oil companies for intentionally misleading and all kinds of other nefarious things, which are true. And then Newburyport. I think you know your town. I hope you're proud of it. They do tremendous things on energy efficiency and energy sourcing, very proactive. I'm not going to explain them. There are people here from the town that could explain it much better than me. And there's more. These are planned. And you know, this reminds me of companies that are long-term visionary companies. Microsoft and Disney, two of the most successful companies ever. Both of them have shadow carbon pricing, which they intentionally, willfully put on themselves because they don't want to end up somewhere down the road having invested in all this fossil fuel infrastructure and tied up in fossil fuels when that's going to be a expensive place to be stuck. And your city's doing the same there. This is a slide. This is my symbolic slide. This is from the march in Washington, D.C. Last April, the largest environmental march ever. I was resting under a tree when I saw the sun coming through the trees and people running and taking pictures, and it just filled my heart. I was like, it's really cool. I think it's really cool. And what I think it symbolizes is that I think people want this. People want clean energy. People want a cleaner world. People want to solve climate change. They're just not sure how to go about it. It seems like a big job. It's intimidating. How do we do it? Most of us, before I did this, I didn't know anything about any of this. So I had to teach myself. But we're ready. We need to come together. So I won't leave this up here because if you want to know the stuff, it's on the brochure that's on the table. Just say quickly, we have every week a call where you can hear our dynamic people that talk about what we're doing. You just listen. Or you could come to our meeting. It's actually the second Saturday in February this month. And thank you to all the local groups here. I want to thank Jeff Clark and Art Courier, who did a ton of work to put this event together. And I turn you over to Jeff. Thanks.
Okay, so we're going a little out of order, but James Kelcourse has arrived, and I wanted to introduce him. So he serves as a member of the Massachusetts House of Representatives. He's an Amesbury resident, and he was elected to represent the 1st Essex District. And he serves on the Joint Committee on Economic Development and Emerging Technologies. He's on the Joint Committee for Education and the Joint Committee on the Environment, Natural Resources, and Agriculture. He was very active in Amesbury government for a while. He was on the vice president for the city council. He was a city councilor at large, and he was also on the planning board. And he completed both his undergraduate and graduate education at Villanova University and his Juris Doctor from the Massachusetts School of Law. And he has a wife, Amanda, and 2 children, Michael and Thomas. And so he's vested in making a great future for his kids. So I want to bring James up and have him talk a bit about this.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to be here. And I apologize for being late. We were in session at the State House today, and traffic was a little... There were a lot of cars on the road. There's not a lot of people taking public transportation, unfortunately. And when I pulled into the parking lot here, I was glad to see that I wasn't the only compact vehicle. And as you can tell by my size, it's not easy to fit into compact vehicles. But commuting back and forth and driving around the communities and serving the 1st Essex District, like was just said, I want to make sure that I'm a good steward for the environment, lead by example. Like the old saying goes, think globally, act locally. Let's each do our part. But beyond that, as your legislator, we can do things, as was just indicated before, by moving legislation along that's going to help the environment. So not only are we doing our part to provide an excellent education for our children in our school systems, do all that we can by providing jobs to enhance the economic vitality of the great state of Massachusetts, but we're also concerned about places like Plum Island, like Lake Attitash and Salisbury Beach, the Great Marsh, and other important resources, environmental resources right here at home. One of the things that myself and the group of the North Shore delegation does often is we get together and we talk about things such as water quality issues, things that affect the Great Marsh. Merrimack River is one of the biggest issues right now. We're talking about dredging, we're talking about Stormsurge, the beach center, the vulnerability of some of the homes and residents along Plum Island. It was indicated to me when Art and some of the other gentlemen came into my office, district office here in Newburyport not too long ago, is, what are we going to do about some of these things? Well, going back to what I just indicated earlier, I mean, one of the things that we can do is we can take steps here locally to make sure that we're ensuring the safety of our citizens, along these vulnerable areas. One of the ways we can do that, I know that here locally, your municipal government looks at zoning. Zoning's really important. Are we putting homes in vulnerable places along our coastline? Are we jeopardizing? Jeopardizing these important resources. One of the things that we're looking at right now in the Environment, Natural Resources and Agriculture Committee is a bill that would look at perhaps reclaiming some of these properties and restoring them to their original state, because the dune systems play a very important role, as we all know, in protecting the inland, especially here in Newburyport. Having a barrier beach such as Plum Island that is there to protect us in the event of some of these storms, we have to make sure that is there for future generations to come. Recycling. You're going to hear from, I think, Molly Ettenborough tonight, your recycling coordinator. Recycling is so important. I just had a discussion with the mayor the other day, and she had indicated to me, the amount of waste that each and every one of us takes out of the grocery store when we leave with our food, the packaging that all of our food products are encased in, the jugs and so forth. And it was funny. It's not long ago when I was a child growing up in the 70s and 80s. I remember going down to the spigot on Plum Island and filling up our fresh water and coming home with that. Now it seems like everybody's got a plastic bottle, individual water bottle, and they don't keep, well, some of us, and I think a lot of us here in this room, including myself and my wife, carry reusable containers for filling our water up with, for putting our water into. But we need to educate the people. It starts in the schools. We have students come in, the scouts are doing a wonderful job here in Newburyport of recycling and protecting and doing chores and projects to help protect for future generations. And that all starts, I think, with us. I think the best teachers are the parents or the grandparents or the school teachers who can educate the children on ways in which we can further protect our environment. I'll touch upon a couple of things that are happening. I know that the Baker-Polito administration is looking at ways in which to procure clean energy and to ways in which to make wind, solar, hydro more accessible and economically attainable, because some of these, I know we were talking a little bit about some of the prices of the solar that's dropping, which is good. Here in Massachusetts, our state budget, we subsidize a lot of the solar because we see that it's important. And here in Massachusetts, we don't have as many sunny days as Arizona does, unfortunately, and I wish we did. But we need to look at some of those technologies to help us. Because it's so important, and we also as a government, as was pointed out, need to do a better job of those that are taking the first step and being the stewards of our environment by enacting or enhancing or bringing technology and enhancing its value to leave a greener footprint here in the community. I won't say any names, but you could probably figure out who that individual is. We have a gentleman here in Newburyport that has 2 technologies, and we are working with the Department of Public Utilities. There's been this long-standing rule called the single parcel rule. So if you have 2 different technologies on a single parcel, you're going to lose your net metering status. So instead of rewarding somebody who wants to further enhance or protect the environment and use different technologies to rely less on the public utilities, it seems like we're punishing these individuals. So that's something that we have been working on our office since March of 2017. We haven't got it resolved yet. There's a series of hearings that are taking place right now. Hopefully the Department of Public Utilities is going to come out with a favorable finding and that will help individuals such as this person who has a great business here in the city of Newburyport. But as was indicated before, I think the best thing that you can do is be persuasive. Reach out to us. We don't know everything. I mean, today I was dealing in the State House with a 1890 and 1912 law on the books that is clearly outdated. And an Amesbury woman had approached me about it and said, look, it has to do with horses. And said, could you help us with this? And we've been working on it. So I met with House Counsel today, and we're looking at a way in which to bring this law up to 2018 standards from 1912 and 1890. And, we might be, earlier in the day, we were working on a mass health issue. So we're changing gears all the time and focusing in on a variety. Homelessness is another issue that we're dealing with here in Greater Newburyport. That's a serious concern of ours. So we need you to advocate, to reach out to us, because this isn't a partisan issue. This is an everybody issue. There's 40,000 people here in Newburyport, Salisbury, and Amesbury, and beyond that, there's people throughout the Commonwealth, the country, and the world that are depending upon us. It was stated that Massachusetts is the leader, and the speaker talked about that in his remarks at the State House today. That Massachusetts is just the leader, and I agreed with him, and he got a big applause, myself included, for those remarks. We want to be a leader in the effort to make Massachusetts and the world a cleaner place for future generations to live in. It's our job to do that, and you need to help us. And I thank you for helping us, because you do all the time. I say that the constituents that we represent in the 1st Essex District make my job so easy, because you're the smartest, you're the most engaged, you're the funnest to work with, and you come up with the greatest ideas. It's because of you that we're able to do some really good things in that building. And rest assured, you have a terrific advocate, a very strong advocate in the State House that works across the aisle on a regular basis. I was able to get some legislation passed at the end of last year in October, and I wouldn't have been able to do that without leadership on the other side of the aisle that helped me the entire way. So tell me how I can help you. Our email address is available. Our telephone number is available. We have a committee, a constituent office right at 23 Green Street here in Newburyport. Some of you have been there before. We do that so that we're accessible to you, that we're not hiding out in Boston making it difficult for you to come and see us face to face. We want to hear from you because we're going to make the 1st Essex District better together. And we're going to do that with all of your help. And there's a reason why I serve on the Environment, Natural Resources, and Agricultural Committee, because the environment is extremely important to me. I grew up farming. I worked for a Newburyport woman in my youth, and I learned a lot from her. I love the environment, love the dirt, love the vegetables. And you know what? I want to make sure that there's clean dirt and good, healthy vegetables for my 6-year-old and my 8-year-old to enjoy as I've enjoyed for their lives and my grandchildren's lives and their grandchildren's lives. So thank you all for the wonderful opportunity to serve you, and I look forward to working with you on these important issues. Thank you.
So I just wanted to shift gears here. Thanks, Representative Kelcourse. I want to bring Molly Ettenborough up, the recycling coordinator for the city of Newburyport, to say a few words. Thanks, Molly.
Hi, everyone. I'm Molly Ettenborough. If you don't know me, I'm the recycling and energy manager for the city of Newburyport. Thanks, Jim, for your kind words. Newburyport is working very hard on a number of issues. It's not just recycling that we do. That's a great place to start. And if you've been reading the daily news this past week, the recycling market's very challenging right now, but we are going to weather the storm, and we're going to educate people, and we're going to continue to educate people. But that's just one of the things that we do. There are a lot of initiatives that we are undertaking right now. Energy is a big one. You saw some of the things that we are looking at and wanting to do. We have a vibrant energy advisory committee. Some of our members are here tonight. Thanks for coming. And we have a Solarized program that's currently underway. It was supposed to end today, but I just got word about 5 minutes ago that that program has been extended for another month because there's so much interest in it that we have a backlog of people who haven't had their homes assessed. So if you've thought about solar or if you thought about air source heat pumps, that's another offering with this program. Now's the time to do it. We have great pricing. It's a bulk purchasing program, and it's available not only to Newburyport residents, but to area and surrounding towns as well. Another thing that we are working on quite a lot these days is resiliency. We have a resiliency committee. Some of our members are here from that, as well as our city engineer, John Eric White. We have a team of graduate students from Harvard coming up this week to look at Newburyport and a potential project that they would like to do here. So we have a lot going on, but as Reb Kalskor said, and as Rob Bonney has pointed out, it takes everyone. And so it's not just residents, it's not just city officials, it's not elected officials, it's everyone, and most important are our students. We have an environmental club, and Andrea is our president this year, so I will introduce her and Jack. And they can tell you a little bit about what they do, but we rely heavily on these guys. I mean, we do a lot of work in the elementary schools, middle schools, but the Environmental Club has been steadfast committee, and their advisor, Graciela Cummings, has been with them for many, many years, and she makes sure that that club stays firm and continues to do their work, and we can't thank you guys enough for all you do. And we look forward to continuing the relationship.
Thank you.
So Andrea Samuelson is the president of the Environmental Club at the Newburyport High School.
Awesome. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak to all of you. Just as a young voice, spreading awareness for something that we're passionate about. So the club has been was enacted in 2005, and since then I think we've really made NHS more environmentally friendly, and I just hope that we can even grow more and more in certain projects like compost bins or filtered water bottle fillers, and starting with our high school community and reaching out to the whole entire community. And I think it's really important, like events like these, and even just our small little actions that can raise big events like the march for the environment. And I just think that the passion of everyone, even all ages and starting young, and that we have a future to change our earth for the better. And I'm very glad I get to speak in front of you to share my passion and tell all of you about how our club is bringing our passion. And we want to fully, forcefully, respectfully change the world and our community.
Okay, moving right along, I'd like to introduce Jeff Clark with the First Religious Society of Newburyport, who's also a member of Stormsurge. You're going to lead a Q&A, right?
Yeah, I think you've heard a lot of facts, real facts, and the kind of reality. So I think this is an opportunity for you to ask, questions of Rob, Representative Kalkhorst, and engage in a little bit of discussion. And one of the things that we have brought
surprised and pleased to hear the National Chamber of Commerce support a carbon tax and gasoline tax. I know it's been fought over for years, and there's reasons people don't like it, there's reasons people like it. But it seems like your cigarette tax slide that you showed made perfect sense to me, and I'd like to say I support raising our gasoline taxes or doing a carbon fee. It's a personal feeling, and I'd stand up and write a letter about that anytime.
What's your name?
Ron Martino, and it's House Bill 1821. You in the back.
Yeah, just to add to what was just said, could Representative Kalkhorst comment on those two bills that are the Senate bill and the House bill, Benson and Barrett bills?
Sure. You know what, I mean, I don't have much knowledge about either bill. Neither of the bills is before me. I understand they are going through the committee process. One of the things I talk about often when I talk to the public is that, you know, we have in the first 3 weeks, or by the first 3 Wednesdays of every first January, the beginning of the new session, this session being the 190th session, thousands of bills, I think over 5,000 bills. I don't have the number. Please don't hold me to that number. But the bills are filed timely and they make their way through the committee process. And, you know, a bill might be filed, you know, that could be the original form of the bill that was filed, changes through the committee process. It either gets reported out favorably or it doesn't get reported out, or it might get reported to study. You know, really the speaker and the majority leader, the leadership of the House determine, you know, for the most part, which bills come out of the reported out committee along with the committee chair. Those bills have not come before us for a vote, consideration. We haven't been briefed really on them, but it's not one. Those two I'm not too familiar with because I do not believe we've had them before us in committee yet, in the committees in which I serve on.
You go right straight back.
This is a really good question for Representative Kalkhorst. Does Massachusetts really need the northern path power line?
You know, I mean, again, and I wish I had, any of these topics, I'll research those issues for you. I can go back, I'll get your name and your information, we can email you, and likewise, that's something that I'd be happy to further discuss with you after, going through that. I just wouldn't be, I wouldn't be able to give you a good, honest answer right now without having, gone thoroughly through it first, and it's not something I'm as familiar with as another representative might be.
No. Lark, you had your hand up. You still had a question?
Sort of a expansion of an earlier question. There was a slide that you put up earlier that had the list of all of our representatives. And what might be interesting is to understand where those representatives stand on the carbon tax bill and on environmental legislation in general, so that we can be directed by you to write effectively targeted messages to those people who need our encouragement. It doesn't make a lot of sense to write a lot of letters to someone who's already on board, but if we could, I don't know whether Lenny Mira, for instance, I'm from West Newbury, I have no idea whether he's sensitive to environmental issues such as the ones we're discussing. A little direction from you on this would be helpful.
Great. So, interesting you mentioned Mr. Mira. He is on the committee where these bills are right now. So he is definitely an important person. We have met with him. He has not committed to voting for them. So absolutely, anyone that's in his district, and if you want talking points, I'm happy to chat with you, email, anything. Obviously, your representative is best. They want to hear from their constituents. They don't necessarily want to hear from someone that doesn't live in their district. So that's one factor. I hear that Rep. Kalkhorst would like to learn more about the bills, so I will. Actually, he gave us a full hour last week to listen to them, so I imagine you would do it again, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm your best advocate on Beacon Hill,
Right.
aside from your senator. I mean,
Yeah.
your rep and your senator are here to, advocate for you.
Mm-hmm.
And this just has the reps, right? This does not have the
Yeah,
senators.
this is, yes, Senator O'Connor Ives just responded to an email a few days ago that Art Courier very deftly got her to say publicly that she supports the bill. So you can thank her. We want her, and we want her to continue to plan on voting for it.
Do you know where Senator Tarr stands?
Senator Tarr is also a person who has not committed. He's been very generous with hour and a half meetings with us. He is interested, he's respectful, he's not quite there yet. So that's a person that needs work also. We'd love to have bipartisan support. There are Republicans that have committed to vote for it, but we need more. In terms of this map, really your representative, ideally, if you know someone who knows someone in these other districts, of the people to the right of those arcs, I would say most have not committed. Tucker, yes. Ehrlich, yes. Crichton, yes. Let's see. Several of the senators, McGee has said he was in support, but he's now the mayor of Lynn. And Senator Lovely has also said, she's on that committee, the TUE committee, so yeah.
So, so on a local level, I wanted to just make sure that people are aware of TerraCycle that's provided at the Recycle Center once a month. I find that among my friends who are pretty savvy about environmental issues, they don't know about it. So it's a program that Molly and Kristen Wall have established for us, and you can dispose of things like grooming, personal grooming, or dental kinds of toothpaste tubes, dental floss, packaging, or the little, plastic things. There's all these containers where you can put different things, wine corks, just batteries, all sorts of things, plus big things like electronics and metal items and so on. So, but Molly's going to have a new and an updated list by next week at her office, and I'm going to see, once it's established, I'm going to get it and bring it here to the senior center, so we can get it, because it's fun to go there and just put all those little things in. It's just fun, and you see all your neighbors, and all that's missing is like Dunkin' Donuts and some lattes. That's all. It's really a fun thing to do, and it feels good to get rid of all that stuff that way.
Let's hit a few more questions. Sir? There.
Yes. How would this carbon tax work on a statewide level? In other words, what is the process of both collecting the monies and redistributing the monies to people, and those people who use more energy than other people, they would have to get less money back in terms of the redistribution? I just
Sure.
want to know exactly.
Yeah.
By the way, I realize for our folks over here, we should be repeating the questions. So basically the question was, how does this whole carbon fee and dividend work? And so you're going to,
At the state.
at the state level.
It is different at the state. We don't extract fossil fuels in Massachusetts, we import them. So it's at the site of importation. And the details are somewhat technical, but as we're importing fossil fuels, the fee is based on the ton of CO2 expected from that unit of fossil fuel. And that is collected by the state government. And for the policy to work properly, it's distributed equally to all adult citizens. So everyone gets the same amount back. There will be some probably hashing out of how frequently that is. A lot of people like the actual check because it reminds people of what's going on, to think about their decisions. The reason why everyone gets the same check back is because you may think, well, let's see, the price of gas goes up a little bit, but then I get a check, so why don't I just keep buying the same amount of gas? Well, the theories of behavior, which are pretty accurate, is that people still want to save money. I got that check, I want to hold on to it and use it for something more fun than just throwing it away on gas. So people still make decisions based on the rising price. And it's gradual over time. People plan for it. It's not a shock to the system. goes up, and can make purchasing decisions. Did I answer all of the questions?
Yes, so kind of, but, so it would be reflected in all of the energy that we utilize. That would be home heating, oil, natural gas, would be reflected in electric
Well,
bills and gasoline.
Everything that's fossil fuel generated.
Yes.
Yeah, so I didn't have time to explain, but we expect that the fossil fuel companies will pass on what they had to pay in a fee to the consumers. But electricity is not part of this because we already have cap and trade on electricity in Massachusetts and the northeastern states, so that's exempted.
So electricity is exempt.
Totally exempted, yes, because we already have a sort of pricing mechanism. It's the older model of cap and trade, but it's been effective, and that's going to stay for now. But yeah, any fossil fuel, you're going to see probably a price increase.
So that if a person had an electric vehicle,
Right.
then anybody.
Right. The bills are actually different from the national in that they have some more formulas for taking care of people that are going to get hit harder, that use more fuel. And businesses actually get money back in the state bills, whereas in the federal, businesses do not. It's just the citizens.
I just want to say one quick thing to the gentleman there in the middle. I think you said, you asked me about the Northern Pass Hydro bid. Was that?
It's a pipeline.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. That's why I thought that's what you said, so I can get some more information on, for you on that.
Hydro.
But,
The power, the electricity is hydro generated out of Quebec. And then Northern Pass would come through Quebec and New Hampshire into Massachusetts.
so that's the Baker Polito.
Right.
Okay, yeah,
And
that's,
Northern Pass in front of the Department of Public Utilities, something like that up in New Hampshire right now, whether or not they're gonna approve it.
exactly. So if you'd like to talk about that tonight or at a later, date, or I'd be happy to chat further with you about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
Matt?
I'd like to have the cities, we get offered, these companies contact us about alternate sources of electricity and gas, and I just don't have the time to research, what are the benefits of these alternate companies, what are the long-term costs of them, and so I just stay with National Grid all the time. And I think other people do the same thing because we just don't really understand these alternate companies, and I think they're using more sun and wind sources, but I also think they're probably more expensive than the National Grid cost. And, I, as a consumer, would be willing to spend a certain amount of money for alternate sources, but I'd like to know how much I'm going to spend, et cetera. And I wish there were a program that would explain these to the public more thoroughly.
I'll partially answer. I bet someone in this room knows of a organization that has assessed whether these are actually green and
Right.
a good value. I probably should have done more research. I do get 100% wind from National Grid. I do pay a little bit more for it. I've been told that I could get a better deal. I haven't had time to find a better deal. So I tell my nephew, this is your Christmas present, your future. I'm getting wind power. He'll still get a real present too, but I don't know, does anyone know of kind of a organization that
Yeah.
monitors the source?
Your state government, so feel free to reach out to us. No, we give people all kinds of information on these types of programs all the time. And in fact, we have a direct pipeline right to National Grid. So, we have somebody that we can work with who can give us the information that you might need, or some Department of Public Utilities or any of these other folks, within state government, we're able to help you. There's a lot of organizations that, your state representative, your state senator.
I mean, they will compare what is offered by National Grid and the different programs of National Grid.
Absolutely,
and all these other
absolutely,
companies.
and we can get you that information if you reach out to our office. We'd be happy to provide that to you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ma'am, you're in the back.
I wanted to say that we changed to clean energy, and it's we get our electricity, the bill still from National Grid, but we pay a little bit more, and it's all from renewable energy.
Yes. Awesome.
Good. Let's take one more and then we'll wrap things up. You in the back.
I'm just going to switch a little bit. One thing you did not mention at all is the plan by our dear president, jokingly, to do offshore drilling, which is a huge issue because, frankly, it's the last thing we need, but it directly affects our coastline, not to mention everything in terms of how we live. And you didn't mention anything about that and how it affects the climate change directly right here, not to mention the coast itself and every single thing that lives around it. I work with marine mammals, rescuing them as well as rehabilitating them, including the North Atlantic right whales, and have seen what's happening with them. So I know for a fact what seismic blasting and drilling will do to marine mammals on our coast. And nothing was mentioned about that tonight and how much that will affect climate change.
Well, so the question was, we didn't really talk about the opening up of any of the resources around the country to, more oil, gas drilling, particularly off the coast. I think we should ask our governor to do what the governor of Florida did, which was go in and raise hell and say, not on my coast, you can do it off of Texas or, but.
Why aren't we introducing a bill that says it can't be done in our state, off of our coastline of our state? Why aren't we introducing a bill for that?
That's a good question. The one thing I will note, and I don't know if you have anything to add to this, but the one thing I'll note is that when you look at the, and matter of fact, the Stormsurge did a great presentation a while ago on offshore wind, and when you understand the rights to using every square foot that is off in the Gulf of Maine, it would take a lot of work to make sure you could actually get the rights to drill, because the U.S. Navy has rights to certain things. Certainly the wind farms that are going out are going through this exact same process of trying to get rights, like the one off of Block Island. So it would be a long process to actually do any of that exploration, but
Doesn't seem to stop them, though.
yeah.
I'll just add that you come at this from several angles. Banning it by state would be awesome. It's horrible. It's a bad thing. Now, supply and demand, if we reduce our use of fossil fuels and make it less and less of a good deal to invest in new drilling, that's another factor too. I mean, we already have enough fossil fuels to kill ourselves, so we don't need to drill anymore. But so as that becomes less and less lucrative, there also going to be less incentive to go out there and do very expensive offshore drilling.
Well, it's already on the plans.
Yeah.
I can tell you that.
Did you have a?
Every single.
I just wanted to add a comment to that. So if you want to get active in opposing the offshore drilling, Surfrider Foundation.
There's a meeting being held February 27th at the Hyatt Hotel in Boston from 3 to 7. It's a public hearing.
Yeah, they're very
Anybody
active,
wants to
just
go.
not just in the Northeast, but also all the way around
Yeah.
the other
The hearings
coast.
are being held throughout the country on every coastline state.
Yeah,
but
they're very well,
from Massachusetts.
they're very well organized. So if you go to surfrider.org, you can latch on to that if that is something that you're really motivated by.
Yeah.
This is the webcast.
Well, the public hearing for Massachusetts is being held in Boston on February 27th to be heard. The public is, and anyone else, on fighting the drilling and the blasting.
Do you know what committee that's before on February 27th?
It's an open hearing. I do not
Okay.
know.
Well, if you need any help with
I'm-
accessing, certain people in the legislature or
We're
the
bringing-
administration,
I know Congressman Moulton is
Yeah.
coming to it. I'm bringing 3 of the organizations I work for are all coming. We're bringing National Geographic photographers with all of their pictures and everything
Okay.
else.
Good.
To show the damage that's being done.
we'll be glad to help you, our office will.
Well, I would like to thank everybody for the conversation after the presentation. I do have to ask this, did anybody come specifically to see the fossil-free watch party? You did? So we will run it from here on out for anybody who wants to stay and watch this. So this is a gathering that's happening in Washington, D.C. is much like what we're having here, except there's national figures such as Bill Mckibben and Bernie Sanders who are going to be speaking on the topic. This is going to be recorded, so anybody who is on our mailing list or signed in outside will make sure you get the link to so you can hear the whole thing. But I think the best thing to do right now is to have if you don't want to have any other conversations, the people that are at the desks back in the lobby are happy to talk about some of these issues specifically. Certainly use the materials we have to think about how you want to write your message to your representatives on the specific issues that are of interest to you. And anyway, thanks to all the groups that helped put this on, and thanks to you for having a great conversation afterward.